Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're going to have a look at what the sheriff does in Vampire the Masquerade and how we can portray this character as close to the books as possible. Let's dive right in. According to the definition provided on page 25 of the 20th Anniversary Core Rulebook, and I quote, "The sheriff is the prince's right-hand kindred responsible for the physical enforcement of princely decree. Some sheriffs are diligent masters at arms, while others are thuggish, bloody fuckheads who abuse their authority to torment those beneath their station. A sheriff may appoint hounds to assist him, or the prince may appoint them, in the interests of curtailing a sheriff's overt power." We're given more details about this on the 20th page of the companion, which says, "By invoking the authority of the prince, the sheriff may, in some domains where stability is more important than the rights of individual kindred, violate the traditions themselves. The sheriff may employ these benefits only as long as the prince grants her license, but it is sufficiently broad to make a very versatile trump card, especially when dealing with those who threaten the kindred order in a domain. Of course, empowering one's agents to act above the law is the textbook indicator of tyranny and the sign of a desperate or oppressive prince. Such princes may not last long, but they do so at great cost to their reputations and those of their sheriffs in the long term. In such cases, a storyteller may rule that the tradition-breaching sheriff's title status is actually only one instead of two. Needless to say, those sheriffs who breach the traditions out of their own political expediency rather than in the prince's interests may soon find themselves stripped of their titles and starved of blood." Alright, a physical enforcer of princely decree. That sounds a bit cryptic. What exactly is a princely decree? I mean, all princes rule in accordance with the traditions, right? Well, for the most part, but not always. The books also mention that the interpretation and enforcement of the traditions is the right and responsibility of the prince. So, what that means is that the rules of one domain might not be interpreted and enforced the same way in another, which is very much to my personal liking because it creates a bit of legislative variety, if we can call it that, from one Camarilla city to another. That being said, let's take a look at an example of princely decree, of local law. And for that purpose, I will read you Loden's Laws from Chicago by Night, 1st edition, page 11. "I have but 5 laws in my city. As long as you obey them strictly, I shall not harm you, nor allow others to do so. None in my city shall kill and leave behind evidence of their feasting. If your slaying shall cause an investigation among the police, or worse, among the press, then I shall track you down and extinguish you, or if others speak for you, exile you. You must lick all wounds and dispose of all those you kill. I hold the 4th tradition in strong regard, and do not take such violations of the masquerade lightly. Do not harm the travelers to the city, for its wealth is based upon it being a center of commerce and travel. You may feed from such, but do not leave any evidence of your feast. You should not test me on this, for these folk are the basis of the wealth of my realm. Have nothing to do with any of those among the press. They are to be strictly ignored. They are my domain. Neither should you attempt to create contacts or retainers among the police of this city. They are my domain as well. Keep the sanctity of Elysium, for that is our place of rest and recreation. No act of violence or struggle shall be tolerated. You may attend my court there, as all in my city are free to do so, but you must not carry your conflicts into the sanctity of its ground. Do not hold commerce with my enemies or those who seek to usurp my rightful authority. I shall repay treachery with treachery, rebellion with iron might. Let me caution you, I know all that happens within my realm. Do not think you can keep secrets from me. Heed these words, and do not attempt to disobey my laws. I am a fair and even-tempered prince, but I warn you, do not cross me. My temper hath no bounds. Alright, that's great. So now we know what a princely decree looks like. Thank you, Chicago by Night. The very first thing we can notice is that Loden has 5 laws, not 6 traditions. Now these are obviously similar, and the traditions are, of course, enforced as well, but we're clearly told the punishment for violating his first law, for example, which is obviously the Masquerade, it also references that tradition. The punishment for that is destruction. No second chances. The only mercy you get is if others basically beg the prince to exile you. Only if others speak for you. You leave behind any evidence of your feasting and it causes an investigation, whether that's a very public frenzy or a hidden photo or a video someone took of you in your moment of negligence. You are ash. Nice. The second thing we immediately notice is a guarantee of safety from the prince when he says, I shall not harm you, nor allow others to do so. That's a very serious promise for a prince to make. Certainly, the prince has a lot of things to do. Maintain retainers, run their own business and such, monitor the city with all of its living and unliving inhabitants, meet with the primogen to take dolences and requests, since the primogen are, at least in theory, the representatives of their respective clans in the city, and so on. Very busy kindred, a lot of things to do, which is why they're not going to waste time chatting with fledglings and neonates. So, how can such a busy individual guarantee safety? Well, by delegating that responsibility to their sheriff. Which responsibilities are we talking about exactly? Well, safety and punishment for transgressions, judging by the book. Safety and punishment. I want to step back a little now and just tell you what kind of sheriffs I've seen in some of the games I've played. And we start off with the video games, because we've probably all played those, or a majority of the people listening to this have also played those. In Bloodlines, we see the sheriff being portrayed as more of a bodyguard and an executioner, as this fierce combatant, a real brute, a soldier, or a doped-up gorilla, as Smiling Jack calls him. A soldier who is loyal, but really passive. I mean, Lacroix sends you to do all the dirty work, while the sheriff, who should be in charge of citywide security, just sits around in the prince's office. So that's a very one-dimensional representation, which doesn't really resonate with the books. In Bloodlines 2, at least from what I've seen of the gameplay, on the protagonist's very first interaction with the sheriff, Benny Muldoon, he says, and this is probably one of the only times I will cuss on the channel, but I gotta quote him. He says, "Fuck the Camarilla. Fuck the prince." Before telling the protagonist, fire, they have one night to sort their business in Seattle and leave. This is supposedly after you took his bait, precisely so he can get to know you, but he never asks for the protagonist's name, reason for being in the city, any of that. And on top, he shows disloyalty and insults the very institutions which gave him his power. Maybe this attitude is explained at a later point in the game, but his sheriffship is obviously lacking. If your job is enforcing princely decree and being a mediator between the authorities and whoever passes through the city, well, you'd better know exactly who it is you're dealing with. I mean, when the police stop you, the first thing they do is ask for ID, right? How does this Benny person know you're not an Assamite assassin sent here to ash the prince? How does he know you're not an antediluvian Rose from Torpor or a Sabbat infiltrator? Well, He doesn't, and doesn't care. For reasons. The person who's supposed to be in charge of citywide security. So again, this really is not a good representation of what the sheriff does, and between you and me, if I were Prince in Seattle, Benny would have been nowhere near the position of sheriff. Maybe a scourge, at most. But most likely, he would have been a pile of ash, because if you come into my domain, benefiting from my laws, my protection, and you openly insult me, I instantly greenlight you and you get taken off the yard really quickly, Benny boy. But enough prison slang. I'll return to Bloodlines, and really quickly, I want to say when the protagonist first arrives in Hollywood, he is stopped by one of Isaac Abrams' men, who says, "Ain't seen you here before, and if I haven't seen you, neither has Isaac, so that's your next stop." There we go. That's more like it. Of course, this guy isn't a sheriff. He's probably an anarch reeve or someone who works for the reeve. Still, he shows so much more competence than others, like the doped-up gorilla or Benny. In the tabletops I've played, the sheriff was often portrayed as a special forces soldier sent in to punish a transgression and neutralize all threats, or a Holmesian detective who investigates some murder or wrongdoing. But both of these representations fall apart as well. If the sheriff is on the scene and ready to kick butt after the masquerade has already been violated, or after the anarchs hit up someone's haven, that's already a bit late to guarantee safety and to protect the masquerade. Chaos ensues. As a detective, let's face it, there are no kindred detectives of kindred crimes. I mean, if a crime is indeed committed, like a murder, let's say, it's very unlikely you'll catch the killer by following clues and checking out the crime scene. Kindred often leave no trace, no prints, no blood trail. They can use obfuscate and so many other supernatural abilities, which make it nigh impossible to backtrack and figure out who did what and how they went about it. So these ideas also fall apart in the long run, and on top of that, they are reactionary. They don't actively discourage crime and keep the city safe, but they come as a reaction to a violation which has already occurred. Now let's look at how a sheriff might go about actually doing a good job. One person cannot monitor the whole city, that's for sure. So having allies, contacts, retainers, and self-appointed hounds is very important. Well, what if your sheriff character doesn't have all that yet? As the loyal enforcer of princely decree, the sheriff is an extension and a representative of princely authority, which means their conduct directly reflects on the prince's image. They are effectively the right hand of the ruler of the domain. That being said, we can imagine the prince will inevitably share some of their own resources with their loyal lawman. Information about smaller private domains which the prince can gift his servants, information about other kindreds, networks, and businesses, boons which are in large cities, they are the purview of the chancellor. But a sheriff should definitely be aware of these. They should be aware of problem areas in the city, the presence of other supernaturals, and approximate positions of their hideouts, local gangs, mortal gangs, and their leaders. These are all the things a sheriff needs to know in order to keep everyone safe. Deputizing hounds, which is well within the ability of the sheriff, is also a great source of information and muscle, and that position can be bestowed upon an unwilling kindred. I mean, the sheriff has just deputized you, whether you like it or not. He just did it. So either you play along, or it's grounds for destruction on the accusation of treason, let's say. The choice is yours, but not really. So the chief law enforcer can always get more pieces on the board if need be. Equipment-wise, we can imagine, again, as an extension of the prince's authority, this guy and his retainers aren't going to run around ill-equipped. Intelligence is only one vital part of the perks at their disposal. Bulletproof vehicles for escorts, various tactical tools and weapons, armor or reinforced clothing, safe houses and secret emergency havens. All of these things are accessible to the sheriff if the prince is wealthy and prosperous, because if he can't keep himself and his retainers safe while operating discreetly, occasionally making a show of his power with confidence, then the prince looks weak. He makes the prince look bad and diminishes their credibility. So the sheriff definitely has a certain image to uphold. I mean, let's think of it this way. If your own guards are better equipped than the sheriff's hounds, then who's keeping who safe? Why do you need that external protection if you have your own? Of course, each kindred can get their own security, and most do, but they have nowhere near the resources a sheriff does. So again, the sheriff upholds a certain image because it's an extension of the prince's image. A good example of a solid sheriff is found in Coteries of New York. He's elegant, well-dressed, powerful, confident, intimidating, well-equipped, and he actually acts like the head of security, not a bodyguard or a detective or a disloyal prick. Now let's look at how a competent sheriff behaves. If you have to fix and clean up a wrongdoing, you're already losing. The sheriff needs to monitor the domain actively, know what's going on, and discourage or prevent chaos and kindred crime. A competent sheriff isn't just a good soldier, but a good businessman and politician who is always up to date with the latest gossip. Say you catch someone breaking the Masquerade, either live or on a photo/video. The trigger-happy sheriff will bring this to the attention of the prince and will probably execute the kindred who messed up. The long-run sheriff will blackmail and turn that kindred into his informant. I have evidence of you breaking the Masquerade. Here it is. Good. Now here's what can happen. Either you owe me big time, and you repay me by assisting with solid information every time I ask you about something, anything. Or I take this to the prince right now and you're ash. Your choice. And now I hear you asking, why would the sheriff do something risky like this? I mean, isn't this a manifestation of disloyalty, as it were? Not really, because like we saw earlier, vampire murderers rarely leave any trace, but they rarely act alone, and are most likely part of a criminal conspiracy. Someone ordered them or hired them to do the hit, or so on. There's a lot of people in the city trying to take more power for themselves, and they often end up acting together as part of a conspiracy or using external assets to get the job done for them while they lay low. They know about these moves because they're backing each other up. They're in cahoots. So if you have compromising material on someone, you can always squeeze them into giving up someone else who's involved in said conspiracy. Basically, the easiest way to prevent crime is to have whistleblowers and informants everywhere, taking an active role in prevention. The good sheriff discourages crime, conspiracy, any acts which would be considered against the prince. Get the system to work for you. If something happens on a private domain, you can tell the owner, okay, so you're telling me this happened on your domain, which you are legally 100% responsible for, but you have no idea how it happened or who did it? Great. You have 1 week to give me something, or I take this to the prince and propose to have your domain revoked, since you can't keep an eye on a small city block. It's your responsibility. The way I know the prince, you might get exiled too. So consider what you're about to give me very carefully. Kinda like that. And hey, unforeseen things will happen. They will inevitably happen, right? Violations of the traditions, your weird local conspiracies, trying to get the anarchs to remove those in power so some weird primogen can take over, or whatever it is. But if the lawkeeper takes an active stance in discouraging that and proves to everyone that they have eyes and ears everywhere, it's so much less likely to happen again or to happen frequently. And having said that, I'm thinking about Lodin's Koshmar praxis, which was 50 years long, during which nothing significant happened and the Camarilla prospered in Chicago. So yes, you can discourage would-be enemies from making their moves. You can intimidate them into inaction. But you need to take an active stance in doing that. So if the sheriff does this often enough, with success, without being a cheap schoolyard bully, as some of them are, but presenting themselves as an intimidating, no bullshit strategist and tactician who is always on the lookout and knows everything that is going on. He's up to date with all the boons, all the violations, who owns what, domains, retainers. You can't keep anything from him. That kind of attitude and image will discourage kindred from acting against the prince's decrees, for sure. It's not about what he knows right now and what he currently has eyes on, but the fact that he's got dirt on everyone. So when the threat reaches them, the person they have dirt on, their allies might turn on them. They will most likely turn to maintain their own status, their resources, all that good stuff they worked so hard for. Right? So the wise sheriff knows when to punish, when to make an example out of someone, and when to just force someone into owing them a boon. Right? They know when and what to share with the prince for everyone's safety, because the prince obviously also needs to be kept up to date, and the sheriff derives their power from the prince. But they also need to know which information to just keep for themselves. Keep their office running smoothly. Keep the city safe. Don't get involved people who don't need to be directly involved. In a previous episode, I mentioned most sheriffs are political hires, which they probably are, as the right hand of the prince, but obviously they need to have enough competence to keep that position. The prince is directly going to rely on this person for information regarding city security. And that's a huge deal. Make no mistake, when the stability of their domain and their image depends on the sheriff, the prince is going to think long and hard about who should take this role, for sure. That being said, I absolutely love playing this kind of character, precisely because it requires active and constant participation in city matters, even in times of relative stability and peace, when there's no weird Sabbat raids, elders rising from their torpor. None of that. The sheriff still works diligently on expanding their network and resources and keeping tabs on everyone, because as we know, the jihad never ends. The conflict is always there. It's just obfuscated in some ways. So playing the sheriff is very interesting in the sense that it almost plays like a political and a very social strategy game. You got to be very careful how you build your network, how you ensure that the information you receive is genuine, whether through the use of various disciplines or intimidation, or it is a wonderful experience. So there we have it. The sheriff is an enforcer of princely decree. In this episode, I shared with you what I think that means and how I believe a character occupying this position should go about their business. But if you think there's something I've missed, overlooked, or misinterpreted, please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.